8 years after she became First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon has announced her resignation. So what next for Scotland? Tonight we are in Pitlochry to find out. Welcome to Debate Night. It's the end of an era. Nicola Sturgeon has been a huge figure in Scottish politics for 2 decades and is our longest-serving First Minister. Tonight, reaction from the voters and our panel to her departure. With us this evening, Nick Nairn is a restaurateur, chef and hospitality campaigner, the youngest Scottish chef to win a Michelin star. He's cooked for every First Minister and promotes Scottish produce through his cookbooks and TV shows. Tess White is the Scottish Conservative MSP for North East Scotland and the party spokesperson for public health, women's health and sport. Before entering politics, Tess worked for over 30 years in the oil and gas industry. From Scottish Labour, Michael Mara is the MSP for North East Scotland and the party spokesperson for education and skills. Michael's been a member of the Labour Party for most of his life, becoming a councillor in 2017 and entering Parliament 2 years ago. We're also joined by Kelly Gibbon. Kelly was the runner-up in Channel 4's Make Me Prime Minister series. She joined the SNP at 17 and cited Nicola Sturgeon as her inspiration for becoming interested in politics. And finally, from the SNP, Richard Thompson is the MP for Gordon and spokesperson on international trade, Northern Ireland and Wales. Richard worked in the financial sector before becoming involved in political life almost 20 years ago as the SNP's head of campaigns. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And of course, welcome to our studio audience here in Pitlochry. It's great to be with you our first time here, and you can join in the discussion from home at BBC Debate Night. BBCDN is the hashtag you need on social media to get involved, and we also have a new Debate Night podcast which will be available when the show ends tonight. So this is our first chance after today's momentous news to find out what the voters' reaction is to the departure of Nicola Sturgeon. So let's just start on the front row down here. Let me start with the man on the right. We'll just work our way along. When you heard the news, how did you feel?
Surprised. Wasn't hugely expecting it. Normally a First Minister or a Minister in Cabinet or some such there's a momentous occasion that causes them to leave office, generally for negative reasons. So yeah, it was quite a surprise.
Yeah.
First thoughts from you?
Yeah, very much so.
Didn't see it coming?
Did not see it coming.
Did not see it coming. And lady on the end here as well, your first thoughts when you heard the news here today?
I was quite pleased because I'm not very keen on the SNP because I think there are things happening at the moment that are far more important than independence, and our education and NHS are broken. I think she probably, I know some people saying she didn't, I think she probably did go before they turned on her party turned on her. Because they realised, but I think she was an extremely good orator, and I think she made me feel safe during COVID.
Pandemic.
So I liked her, but I don't like what her party stands for.
Okay, we're going to spend a bit of time on this, of course, tonight, and I'm going to separate it into 2 areas: the past and the present and the future, where we go from here. So let's go to our first question, which comes from Jim Granger. Jim.
Thank you. Is Scotland in a better state today than when Nicola Sturgeon took over the running of the SNP in 2014?
Thank you. The First Minister said in her statement today at Butte House, Scotland is a changed country in so many ways, changed for the better. Michael Mara, what do you think? You joined the Labour Party age 17, yeah. She joined the SNP age 16. So you've had a life devoted to a different kind of politics, but you understand perhaps some of her reasons here today. But does she leave the country in a better state?
Well, objectively, on any kind of number basis, no. That's quite clear. I'd say as a father of 2 girls, I have appreciated having a role model, a figure leading our country who's female. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. It's a really important message to send to girls and women that so often, pale, stale male figures are at the front of those political parties and governments, and she's somebody who's been different to that. And
our longest-serving First
Minister. I think that, in essence, that is she's sent that message, and that's a good thing. And I think we could all agree on that. I think objectively, is the country in a better place? No, it's not. I think, whether it be in education, the economy, or NHS. And actually what we have at the moment is a multiple pile-up of crises in different places. Frankly, her entry, the entry of the next First Minister, is on fire. There's a huge array of different issues that are going badly wrong, which I think has played a role in her decision today. I don't see how it couldn't. Political leaders who things are going swimmingly for don't leave office on that basis. But none of that is to detract from her leadership in the pandemic and that really strong message she sent, I think, as an individual and as a figurehead for the country to women and girls. And we should thank her for that service and the public service, and clearly the toll that takes. But I think on any metric, the country's in a worse place than when Nicola Sturgeon took over.
I want to hear more from our audience here in Pitlochry tonight. Tess White, what do you think?
I think Nicola Sturgeon has dominated Scottish politics for 8 years, but she has created and led a divisive country. If you look at her legacy, so terrible drug deaths, an attainment gap, she said it was a flagship, a widening attainment gap, our education standards are slipping down the international tables. We've got life expectancy that's the worst in 40 years. So whatever she touches, we might be talking about the deposit return scheme, the National Care Service, whatever she touches, this deal that she's done with the Greens, that she's at the anti-car, they've missed their climate targets. If you look at all the different things, whether it's ferries that don't work, wasting £500 million, whether it's giving 50 million to BiFab, whether it's a botched census. So whatever it is, Stephen, it's just a big failure.
What's been our best achievement?
Well, in terms of one thing that she did do, but I'd like to mention culture before I can just mention. So I was a new politician in 2021. And for me, I was expecting to have a collaborative where we'd work together for the interest of Scotland. So her saying that she detested the Tories, so I'm a Tory, how do you think that felt for me and the people who voted Tories? That's a significant population. And I think the toxic culture that we've had in Scottish politics for the last 8 years is just not doing the best for Scotland.
And our best achievement?
The one thing that she did do, well, in addition to, obviously, she's got this Midas touch where she is a personality, but she did work with the British government on the free ports. So those two, that shows that the SNP can work and can collaborate for the benefit of Scotland. We'd just like to see more of it.
Into our audience, man on the back row.
Thank you. Nicola Sturgeon led a party whose members called quite a number of people scum. Not very well educated. A lot of people got upset about it. I didn't, because anybody would know that scum always comes to the top.
Richard Thompson from the SNP. Our question is Scotland in a better state today than it was when Nicola Sturgeon took the job?
Yes, I believe it is. And I think we need to consider the tumultuous period in which Nicola Sturgeon has been First Minister. We've had the continued impact of austerity, we've had Brexit, which Scotland clearly didn't vote for, and we've also had the pandemic that has knocked public services in all parts of the UK in a direction that we wouldn't want it. But throughout that, she has led a progressive government. She has, as Michael conceded, she has been a figurehead who has inspired many. I'm also the father of two young girls who, have certainly been inspired by her. And certainly, I remember particularly the day that Theresa May came up to Bute House, and I remember saying to them, "Look at this, drink this image in." But also, even for people who are not fans of the party which she leads, I think her leadership during the pandemic was standout in terms of communication, in terms of reassurance. And I think that even, we've heard one lady in the audience say that tonight, but there are many others who would point to that as a very significant achievement in itself. But for me, I think the biggest achievement will go down as the 1,140 hours of free childcare. That's transformative socially. That will enable children to develop so much better than in many cases it might otherwise have been the case, but also it unlocks the potential for so many people to go back into the into the economy or caring roles and to make the best contribution that they can in life.
She talked about that today in baby boxes and early learning as well. I want to hear from the SNP supporters in the audience tonight. For you, gentlemen over here, how does she leave Scotland?
Well, I think today she left with grace, courage and dignity, and I think she has been a tremendous leader. In a sense, though, whoever is elected leader, it doesn't matter. What matters is that people who believe Scotland can be a prosperous, successful, and dare I say it, happier nation, keep voting SNP. Because once independence is achieved, the SNP becomes just another party. So if you want to see your country improve, as I would say, because the prosperity can't be in doubt given our resources, then vote SNP down the line. And I imagine we'll elect a competent leader, but you know, that is the thing. Keep voting SNP.
And see what happens next. Lady down here in the middle. Yes, you go.
So Richard mentions all the things that he thinks we should be proud of that Nicola Sturgeon has brought in her tenure. But she took on a country who voted against independence and has spent her entire tenure trying to get another independence referendum, rather than focusing on the real problems that we have in this country. She has spent the majority of her time focused on getting another independence referendum that we plainly did not vote for. We said no, and she's kept at it.
Richard Thompson?
Yeah, I'll respectfully disagree, because certainly the mandate, the outcome in 2014 was as decisive as it needed to be. But the SNP did win a mandate for another referendum when it put forward a conditional proposal in its 2016 manifesto, and it gave the specific example that if there was a significant change in opinion or a material change in circumstances such as Brexit. Now, the Scottish Government has quite self-evidently got on with dealing with a number of other governance issues throughout that time. But Brexit created the condition whereby it was the manner in which the 2014 vote was won was untenable. We were lied to in that, particularly about our EU membership. And this is an issue which will need, one way or another, to be resolved. But I think it's extremely unfair to say that that has been the focus of the government since 2014. Quite clearly it hasn't been.
I was wondering whether, if we don't accept her resignation today, she'll try again for another one.
I think to come on this, you know,
Kelly Gibbon.
it always bowls me over when people are surprised that Nicola Sturgeon wants an independence referendum. This is a woman that has campaigned for independence her entire adult life. It is no secret. She's never made it a secret. That is what the party was founded to do, and that's what they're voted there for. They were voted for by the Scottish electorate.
We'll come on to the future in a second, but let's stick to the story so far. What do you see as her great achievement so far? Is Scotland a better country, is the question, than it was in 2014?
Absolutely. I think Nicola Sturgeon, and I think irrespective of politics, Nicola Sturgeon is undeniably a fantastic leader. She has been a great leader for this country. She's been a great example throughout the world. She's looked up to throughout the world. I think anyone, I mean, regardless of your politics, could agree that Nicola Sturgeon has been good in her position.
But is the country a better place?
Absolutely.
That's the question.
I mean,
in what way?
Just to start, we have the baby box, we have Social Security Scotland, we have, you know, working families, the poorest families are now £2,000 better off every year than they would have been before. She is focused on progressive initiatives, and she's done what she came here to do. And I think she's gone today with grace. She's done it on her own terms. There's been no drama, there's been no scandal. I think Nicola Sturgeon has been a breath of fresh air in politics, and she'll be sorely missed.
Man on the front row. Yeah, on you go.
Yeah, I was going to reply to the lady there, and Richard beat me to it, but I think Brexit completely changed the situation. It's okay to say, well, Scotland voted against independence in 2014. Because of what happened in Brexit, that definitely changed the goalpost.
And the lady down here in the front row as well. Yeah, on you go.
Yeah, I mean, you say that we're in a better place, and we had 2 hospitals built that didn't function for about a year because of deficits in how they were built. We've got 2 boats sitting there that has cost millions and millions because they chose a design that had never been done before that are not getting ferries across to the islands. I mean, those are just 2 examples of something that she's not got a grip on. And she came in doing a health debate saying that she would save local hospitals. And look at what has happened with the NHS. Look at the hospital situation. You know, that is much worse. And anybody who's had to go to one of the big hospitals in recent times would tell you that we're not in a better place than we were.
Back to Jim, who asked the question.
I certainly don't think we're better off. I think Nicola Sturgeon has allowed independence to overshadow what I think is important to the people and business in Scotland. That is education, the health service, policing, the oil industry, and, as the lady says, the lack of reliable ferries to support tourism for the islands.
Nick Nair, is Scotland in a better position than it was in 2014?
I really am here to represent hospitality and the issues surrounding the particular issues. So I don't really want to be drawn on that.
If you look at what she's done for the country, what do you see as her greatest achievement?
I think the childcare thing was definitely something that has allowed a lot of people to get back to work, and I think it's one of the huge problems we have at the moment is labour and the workforce. We just don't have enough people post-pandemic to man certainly hospitality, but you know, truck driving and all other industries.
Back into the audience, man on the back row there in the middle. Yeah.
I don't have a comment regarding party politics. I'm from Sri Lanka. 72 years ago, we got our independence from British people as one nation. My question is, if you all need independence, why you all can't work together as a nation? That's my question.
OK. We're going to move on to look at the future next in terms of independence. Your views on all of this, the hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Give us a follow at BBC Debate Night as well. We are in Pitlochry tonight. Next week, we are going to be in Kelso. The week after that, Glenrothes. Our first time in both those places. So if you'd like to come along and be part of the audience, just go to the website. It's bbc.co.uk/debate night and click on the link. Come along and have your say. Let's go to our second question on this big subject, the story of the day. It comes from Gary Crawford. Gary, where are you? On you go.
Yeah, sorry. Will Nicola Sturgeon's resignation damage the independence movement?
Thank you. Richard Thompson.
I think Nicola Sturgeon has been a fantastic advocate throughout her entire life in politics for independence. But one of the great strengths of the SNP and the broader independence movement is that there's no shortage of able, articulate people able to paint a compelling vision of how independence could make Scotland a better place. Now, they're not obviously going to be able to reach everyone, but I think that the SNP has a wealth of talent in terms of its individuals who might come forward to do that. So, yes, Nicola Sturgeon will certainly be a loss as First Minister. She leaves a big set of shoes to fill. But, as I say, there's no shortage of talent ready to step up. And when it comes to the wider independence movement, I think its great strength has always been its diversity and its breadth, rather than necessarily the person at the head of that. But certainly I am sure that there will be other committed voices who can come forward and perhaps reach parts of the Scottish electorate that still need to be persuaded.
She says she's gone so that she doesn't have undue influence on this big conference that you have in just a month's time, on the future strategy of all of this. Do you need to have a new leader in place for that, then, to drive that forward? Otherwise, how do you take the decisions?
Well, the decision will be taken by party members, but I certainly appreciate the point that the First Minister made, that as SNP leader, her weight could have been decisive in terms of determining that outcome.
But don't you have to have a new leader on board as part of that conference to move things forward?
Well, our party will, National Executive Committee will decide the timeline for that. But, you know, my own personal view is it would be preferable to have a new leader in place. But fundamentally, this is a decision that has to be taken not by a leader in isolation, but by the party members.
Tess White.
I think we should make the devolved government work. I think Nicola Sturgeon is divisive. I think people want services that work. They want a national health service where they can get their knee operation or hip operation, that they don't have to wait years for an operation. And I think whether it's huge slashing budgets for the local councils, everything, people just need to have a Scotland that they love and believe in. And I think we've gone backwards rather than forwards. And I'm hoping that the replacement for the First Minister will be somebody who is a builder rather than a breaker.
Mike O'Mara?
I think Nicola Sturgeon has done very little to advance the cause of independence in the last 8 years that she's been in charge. The polls are essentially exactly where they were when she took over. So in terms of persuading the public, I don't think that's happened. I really respect people who believe that independence is the way forward for Scotland. It's a perfectly legitimate, I have no problem with any of that. I don't agree with it, but I think that actually those people have been really poorly served by Nicola Sturgeon over the last 8 years. Now, in 2014, she could have taken the decision to say there's 75% of the country who want stronger devolution and a good settlement that works for people. And she could have gone about building that. She didn't. She sought to divide and be the divisive voice at all time. Now, we need change in this country. We need better public services. We need an economy that works. And what we need to do that is to bring people together behind that mission. We do need change, and I think that we have to deliver that change, but it's not going to come from Nicola Sturgeon's successor.
Will Nicola Sturgeon's resignation damage the independence cause? Man on the back row.
Yeah, we're all saying don't want SNP, don't want SNP. Are there any viable alternative parties?
Gentleman down here in the middle.
I think, excuse me, I think the independence movement is much bigger than Nicola Sturgeon and much bigger than the SNP. Yeah. And I think Labour would win a few votes if they started leaning more towards an independence, like break away Scottish Labour from UK Labour.
Kelly Gibbon. Are we closer to independence now, do you think, than we were in 2014?
Yes, undoubtedly. I think one of Nicola Sturgeon's greatest strengths was her ability to bring people together. I think, this narrative that Nicola Sturgeon is some nasty, divisive figure is total. It's just made up. It's a narrative that's completely made up. And this idea that Nicola Sturgeon sits behind her desk all day fantasising about independence. This is a woman who got up every single morning during that pandemic and stood in front of your TV and led you through the hardest time that this country has faced in the last 100 years. This isn't a woman who is tunnel-visioned on a divisive narrative. This is a woman who wants to bring the country together. And Michael, your point about why didn't she just settle for devolution? Why doesn't she just settle for Tory policy? This is what she believes in. This is what the party believe in. And she's every right to go after it.
If I can on that, I have no doubt that that's the case. I've got no doubt that it's the case, and she's believed in it her whole life. The reality is that the pathway to achieving that has to be, surely, only can be, through proving that devolution works, making the economy work, making public services work, and achieving it through persuading people
that
devolution
that used to be
that used to be the SNP strategy. It used to be the SNP strategy to try and achieve that. And in actual fact, that's just been abandoned.
The difference between the SNP and Labour is that the SNP notices when something isn't working and wants to make a change to make that different.
Bodges it up.
Tess White, has she been a divisive figure in your view?
I think toxic. She is extremely toxic.
On.
For her SNP MSPs to stand there and in front of placards that say, I eat TERFs and Tories, it's just completely unacceptable. It's not okay. And I think you can actually see that she's created a very divisive country where people, a significant percentage of the population, don't feel welcome.
You mean like the new Tory party chairman was pictured with a far-right protester last week?
I think,
like that.
I think that's typical. I think that's typical of SNP. Don't want to listen to what somebody's got to say, and will actually talk over somebody. And the problem, I'll just say one final point in relation to this: there's always somebody else to blame for failures. There's failure upon failure, whether it's ferries, whether it's the health service, whether it's a census that doesn't work, which is about to introduce a national care service and waste £1.4 billion. It's all the deposit return scheme that hopefully we're going to talk about tonight. Another disaster upon disaster, and there's always an excuse for a failure.
Let's hear from our audience this evening. Gentleman in the back.
It'd be very interesting if the new First Minister would have the backbone to have an independent audit to see where all the money has been wasted over the last 8 years.
What? Lady in the pink down here.
Richard talked about persuading the electorate to vote for independence. I think the best way to persuade the electorate is to sort out health and education. And to be honest, I'm not seeing it yet. No.
Man in the back row, up there.
Yeah, I think we're on this hamster wheel, and I think, well, I like to coin it the never endum. So I think we could just get on with it, basically, in terms of the country, stop this divisiveness.
Let me go back to the gentleman in the back row here who spoke so passionately about this earlier on.
I think the Tory lady is speaking absolute poisonous rubbish. And how dare she lecture us when south of the border, as that mealy-mouthed phrase goes, we see corruption, we see incompetence, we see waste, staggering amounts of all of those as these idiots are tripped through Downing Street. How dare she lecture us on how to run a government?
Tess White?
I just take, for example, the ferries. So £500 million. You don't want to hear me, if you'd like to let me finish. £500 million wasted, a procurement process that needs to be reviewed and somebody independent verify it. How come those contracts went to people who couldn't deliver? And so if the gentleman there talks about serious issues with governance, I think you need to look right here, right now, at the ferries.
Whilst we're looking at procurement contracts, should we talk about the UK government's procurement of PPE contracts?
Again, Stephen, another example of deflection.
Nick Nairn, will Nicola Sturgeon's resignation damage the independence movement? What's your view?
Stephen, I'm apolitical, OK? I'm here to support the innocent. But I'm listening to the poison in this room. I'm hearing extremist points of view, people butting their heads. We are in a terrible mess in this country at the moment. We have all kinds of problems. We have the cost of living crisis. We have the post-pandemic crisis. We have a huge labour shortage. We have inflation, hyperinflation, simmering below the surface. All of this about we need to work together. We can't have this insane inflation. We have to have some kind of coalition. I was telling these guys, we were in London walking holiday. We went to Churchill's War Room, and I saw a coalition cabinet that sat together, Labour, Tory, Liberal, all together, united in a common cause. And things are so bad at the moment, I think we need to have that. We need to have something new and something different.
What's your view? The hashtag is BBCDN on social media tonight. Let's go to our third question of the night. There are other things our audience are desperate to talk about this evening. One of them this. Jim Granger. Where's Jim?
Has the Scottish Government betrayed the Highlands by breaking their pledge to upgrade the dangerous 89 road by 2025?
Thank you, Jim. I think this was Highland Labour MSP Rhoda Grant who called it a betrayal on behalf of people in the Highlands, the decision to knock back the timescale. We still don't have a new timescale on this yet. Tess White, what do you think? Is this a betrayal of people in the Highlands and beyond?
122 deaths, Stephen, since 2009. A promise to deliver a dual A9 by 2025. Last week, Jenny Gilruth went back on that. Just another example. Last year alone, 12 deaths. It's even their own backbenchers now. Fergus Ewing has just said this is just reckless in terms of we need to think and put safety first. You know, there was an article in the newspaper yesterday about somebody who lives a mile from the A9, and she says that she's got this constant alarms, and when she hears the helicopter, she knows it's pretty serious. So, and I know people who have relatives who have died on the A9. So it's the 80-mile road. They've only dualled 10 miles of it. I would actually say safety should be their first priority more than anything else.
Do you understand the reasoning behind this, though, the reasons that were given for the delay here? The responsibility is to look after public funds here.
I hear what Jenny Gilruth has said, but like Fergus Ewing from a backbench SNP, MSP, I don't understand them. And I come from the energy sector where you put safety first, safety always. And I think 122 deaths is unacceptable. How many more people along the A9 have to die? So Stephen, I would be putting this first.
We're about half a mile from the A9 tonight. People here rely on it every day. Lady on the front row down here.
First of all, I'm just going back a tiny bit, and I wanted to ask, is it Kelly or Kerry? I'm sorry.
Kelly.
Who, if you get independence, who will the SNP blame for everything that they do wrong? And what about, I understand that you raise taxes. Why don't you raise taxes? Because I think a lot of us would like the A9 and the ferries and the new bridge and all this stuff to have actually worked. We want hospitals, we want education. And I think probably quite a lot of people will be prepared to pay for that because it costs money and we're in a financial hole.
OK, I don't want to get too far away from the specific issue of the A9 here and the background to it. Richard Thompson.
Well, I think what has given rise to this is that in the latest section that went out to tender, there was only one bidder, and the bid came in, even with the enhanced level of construction industry inflation that there is at the moment and the higher costs that were expected, that single tender came back at an even higher price than the government expected. Now, I find that quite easy to understand, Tess. Perhaps you would just
Another
press the...
excuse. There's always an excuse.
Would you have gone on and just paid that anyway?
I would have found a tender. They've had 10 years.
You'd have magicked it out of thin air. There was one tender for it.
This doesn't happen just overnight. They've had the last 10 years to think about it. Don't just leave it to the last minute.
Right.
And you're talking to Pitlochry here, who live next to the A9. You see tourist deaths, family deaths. You can't just say, oh, we can't find a tent, we can't do this, we can't find that. We've had 10 years.
OK, that's a lot of words, Tess. It's not necessarily
that's
saying
the
a great
truth,
deal.
Richard, that's the truth.
And the truth is, there was one tender came in that was an excessive cost. Now, that creates an opportunity cost in terms of doing the rest of the road or investing in schools, hospitals...
Yeah, but hang on.
So,
No, wait a minute. The commitment was to dual this road by 2025, which is only 2 years away. You've only done 10 miles. There's another 80 miles to be done. So clearly it was never going to happen on that timescale.
Well, it could have happened on that timescale. There's been various reasons that I think we're all familiar with why it hasn't.
No,
now,
just remind us what those reasons are.
Well, the pandemic has knocked back construction projects right across the world. That's certainly made it more difficult. As I say, there was one tender for this particular section that came in,
a small
and
section.
that didn't come in acceptably. So we're looking at the tendering process to see how more companies can be encouraged to come in. I mean, there was nothing inherently wrong, I believe, with the tendering process. It's worked well in other times. But 10 out of the 11 dockets of work that are involved in dualling the A9 all the way between the total distance between Perth and Inverness have now been completed, are ready to go out. And I share people's disappointment that it's not going to be possible to do it by 2025. And there are far too many casualties on that road. Every incident has a potential to be a
12 months
tragedy.
and years in terms of
a tragedy. And I think the focus has to be in terms of improving safety where we can. But fundamentally, the road needs to be dualled. The commitment is still there. It's unfortunate it's going to take a little bit more time. I'm interested again in the lady's point about more resources being there. When you're having your capital budget cut from elsewhere, because the Scottish Government is only in control of about 20% of its revenues, I believe, when it means that there are pressures elsewhere in the system that cannot be denied.
You can't blame Westminster because you made the commitment to get it done within the financial structures that you had.
Yeah, and the goalposts have shifted considerably over that time for reasons we've already spoken about.
This
affects
real people in the audience here, so let me hear from them. Lady in the pink there.
Surely, when you're tendering, you can do multiple projects at the same time. You don't have to finish one section of the road before you start tendering for the next one. And we could have been so much further ahead. During the pandemic, people were working from home. You could have had those tenders done during the pandemic.
Well, the work has continued through the pandemic to make sure that the tenders are in a position to go out. That's involving the route design, the public consultations.
Are there any more tenders that have gone out and we're waiting to hear back about already? Are there any in the works that we're just waiting to hear back from the
there are other ones
about?
that are ready that will be ready.
But they've not gone out yet.
I think we're waiting to hear from Jenny Gilruth on the timescale for all this. But man on the front row.
Has there been a Green Party influence to delay the road building?
None whatsoever. I mean, there was discussions, obviously, about what would go into the coalition. There's many good things came out of that, like a £500 million package for energy transition in the northeast of Scotland. But also, the commitment to dualling the A9 is absolutely sacrosanct. I'm sorry it's not happening by 2025, but that commitment is cast iron.
Let me just go to the man in the back row as well. Yeah, on you go.
Yeah, living in Pitlochry, the A9, we see the ambulances, we see the blue lights every day. Every time our families are out, it concerns us. I think my wider point is about politicians getting a lot of bad press, whichever party you belong to. When I get the sort of answer we just had from you then, I don't feel that honesty and transparency coming through. I'd just rather you just be straight with us.
Just let Richard come back on this point. I mean, yesterday we had the Welsh Government saying that they are going to be very circumspect about road building from this point. We know the Scottish Green Party are not keen on building roads unless there are key safety measures involved. Can you look this audience in the face tonight and absolutely guarantee them this road will be built?
Yes, I think we're certainly hearing a commitment across the panel that it should happen. I don't know of many people who think it shouldn't happen. The Greens have accepted in government that it should happen. But what we've experienced is problems in terms of the tender for this issue, a contraction of the capital budgets, a range of factors that have made it more difficult to achieve, made it impossible to achieve by 2025. But I don't think anybody's sincerity should be doubted in terms of their commitment to make sure that this happens, because it needs to.
Michael Mara.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me the Greens didn't make a big deal of it in the negotiations with the SNP, because it was obvious to absolutely everybody this timescale wasn't going to be met. And it's been obvious for years. People in Pitlochry know that this wasn't going to be happening by 2025. So there is a need for honesty and transparency around this. You know, we're talking about a government that's been in place for 15 years. I mean, the stories about the wee guy on the Western Isles who built his own road with a wheelbarrow and some chips.
Callum's Road.
Callum's
Yeah,
Road.
Rassy.
And it took him less time than it's taken the SNP to do the 10 miles they've done so far. So if you make that commitment, at the very least, if the circumstances change, be honest about that. But actually, prior to the pandemic, prior to this inflation, they still had a decade. They still had a decade to get that work done, and it didn't happen. It's about priorities and honesty.
These people drive this road every day. Lady there. Yeah.
What about having safety measures now for the black spots on the A9 before it's actually the road is finished and jewelled throughout? For instance, Dunkeld is a very bad black spot. There are other parts. Could we not, I don't know, maybe a roundabout at Dunkeld whilst we wait for the road to be completed? Because Dunkeld is a very bad black spot.
I think Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth has said 5 million will be spent on remedial short-term measures. Gentleman here.
Yes, Richard. I didn't want to hear that it should happen. I want to hear you say it will happen. I drive that road regularly. And it's not about the number of deaths that you've quoted. It's about the horrendous near misses that take place, about the accidents where no one's injured or killed, but there are more and more accidents. So the deaths is one thing, it's the near misses and also the accidents where no one's injured.
Which then close the road and cause
absolutely.
disruption to local communities. Man on the end down there, yeah.
Apart from the importance of the safety angle, there's also the economic benefits which come from the road going up to Inverness, which must make people reluctant to invest in those areas, which are very important for the economics of the Highlands.
And gentleman in the middle here, yeah.
It does cost to build the roads, we accept that. But the cost of a single fatality is in the region of about £2 million per person. There's a cost as well, which has to be borne, as well as the loss, obviously, of these people.
Kelly Given.
I think there are a number of things here. I mean, I think to start with, Jenny Gilruth got up and said categorically, we are still committed to this. So we've said categorically that it's still happening. I think, you know, you're asking for honesty, transparency. That's exactly what Jenny Gilruth did last week when she stood up and she said, listen, we're not going to meet those targets. It's unfortunate this has happened. She made clear that she was disappointed in that herself. But I think as well, there's nuance to be found here. Yes, it's disappointing that it's not happening. And I feel very deeply for the families, especially that have lost people on that road who are very passionate about changing it. And I understand why. But we do have to take nuance into account. We do have to understand that there have been circumstances that have caused this delay. And all we can really ask for is that the government be upfront about that, which they have been.
Gentleman on the front row.
What does that actually mean? There's nuance here. I don't
The
understand what you're saying.
circumstances that have arisen in the last
These
few
are just
years,
words.
The things that have impacted this decision, the cost of the capital budget, the war in Ukraine, Brexit, all of these things, the pandemic, all of these things have been inputted into this situation, which have caused this delay.
These are
It's
just
facts.
excuses.
It's not an excuse. You can call them excuses, but they are facts. These things happened and they had a knock-on effect.
The idea that this road is not getting dualled because Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine is a nonsense. There was a decade before the pandemic where this work could have been done, and there was no timetable delivered at that point.
What do you think is causing the delay?
Well, I mean, this has gone on, it's gone on and on. It's lack of priority, Stephen. It's absolutely clear that if you want to make it a priority, now, I think, of course, every government has to balance out what it thinks the money has to be spent on at different times. This was a promise that was made, and it's not been delivered. It adds to a long list.
Transport Scotland document issued, I think it was either 2014 or 15 or thereabout, that said that there'd be no at-grade crossings for pedestrians, ground level, crossing the road. Down a bit from here, just outside Lunkerty, Lunkerty Gorton, they're in the process of upgrading an at-grade crossing. I personally have written to Jenny Gilruth asking for consideration be given to a pedestrian footbridge put across there. And the response came back from one in our office saying that because neither developer on either side of the road for potential new housing has requested it, then it's not being considered. One fatality would outweigh the cost of that bridge.
The audience here tonight is all from around this area. Put your hands up if you've had a near miss on the A9.
Jeez.
Nick Nairn.
Where there's a will, there's a way. And you put human life ahead of money every time. End of. No excuses.
On that, though, I mean, it's easy to say that, but if they had chosen that option, you better believe we'd be sat here debating why we've been wasting the public's money when we didn't have to, and how we rushed into this contract that we didn't have to. There is really no way for the government to win in this scenario.
I'm pretty sure these people would not be saying that. I'm pretty sure these people
you guys would be.
I mean,
And there've been 122 of them sitting here.
Gentlemen here.
And their families.
On you go.
Until it is upgraded, I feel there should be a more prominent police presence on the A9. And I'm not talking about safety vans that are at non-accident black spots trying to create revenue. There's a very lack of traffic cars on the road that used to be a lot more of.
Okay, if you're a regular A9 user, we'd love to hear from you on this tonight. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. Let's go to our fourth question of the night, which comes from Kirstine Scott. Kirstine.
Hi.
Evening.
Why is it businesses in Scotland have such a problem with the deposit return scheme, which is to be introduced this August?
Thank you. Nick Nairn, you tweeted a bit earlier, the ill-fated scheme is causing huge concern for hospitality. Tell Kirstine why.
OK, strap in. Right, so, I've got to set some context, first of all. Me personally, 100% committed to recycling. It's an incredibly important thing. And we need a scheme that has got to work. We need a scheme that we take the people with us. We need to consult. We need to inform. We need to work out the best way of doing it. We need to introduce it bit by bit, not just hit the ground with everything running on day one. And that is what this scheme is not. It's ill thought out in all kinds of different ways. It's the wrong scheme. We need something. I'm absolutely for that. But this is wrong. So,
What's wrong? What's wrong about it?
Just a wee more context. So hospitality, retail, so many businesses have come out of the pandemic much weakened. We've all taken on debt that we didn't have before. A lot of us struggling with wages and material cost rises, and the big one at the moment is energy cost rises. So our businesses are fragile and weak. And the last thing we need is extra regulation. So this particular scheme puts the onus on the producers to regulate it themselves. So they have to either, if the manufacturer doesn't put the barcode on, they have to do it themselves. We have to put the money up front and then claim it back from Circularity Scotland. So the commercial pressure is on us. The speed of this, the communication of it, I have never had a letter or an email from Circularity Scotland telling me about this scheme. I saw about it on social media. We have multiple hospitality businesses. Nobody's consulted me. I spent the last 2 days on the phone to wine merchants, to small distilleries, to big producers, taking their temperatures. Not a single person agrees with this scheme that thinks it's well thought out. So this scheme was started about 8 to 10 years ago. They started talking about it and how it might look and how it might work. In the last 10 years, our patterns have changed. We no longer go to the supermarkets 3-4 times a week where we could return our bottles. We now get a van to bring it So that's a different thing, but it's a problem because people just don't go to the supermarket so often. So they're much more likely to put the thing in the recycling. Cans, okay? So the barcode in the can, now if you buy a multi-buy, then obviously there will be no barcode on it because the barcode will actually on the cardboard packet. But you imagine nightclubs where they're not allowed glass anymore, quite rightly. They have cans. Are you going to ask 600 or 700 people at a concert, please don't crush your cans at the end of the night because we have to take them back? So if you don't crush the can, it takes up a massive amount of space. So the return system is going to be these vending machines. Who's going to put a dirty, big vending machine in their nice premises? There's a huge problem with contamination. Where are all these vending machines going to sit? How do we know all of this? There's so much detail in this that hasn't been thought through.
There's a lot of pushback from the industry about this. Kelly Gibbon, should it be paused?
I mean, I'm not here to blindly defend government policy. I personally, this is not the sword to die on. It's not just move on, listen to the concerns of the people that it really impacts. That they're obviously very passionate about how it impacts them. Listen.
So this has already been delayed for a year because of the pandemic. Yep. You think ministers should really listen to people? And
I do. I think really coming out of a pandemic where, like you say, hospitality has been impacted disproportionately, you should be listening to the people that own businesses in that sector.
So here's the thing. There's a UK-wide scheme earmarked for 2025. If anything good comes out of this is that the amount of focus that has gone on DRS and the impact it has across industry and into people's lives. So let's see a really good scheme come in and let's win the hearts and minds of people. Let's get our country recycling. I bet you nobody who was involved in this has lived in Sweden, where they have a fantastic recycling thing. And the other thing, why 20 pence? It's 10 cents.
I think this as well is that it's not going to inspire people to recycle if they're raging about the scheme itself. It's not going to inspire anyone to do anything. So pause it, reconsider, speak to the people it impacts and move along.
Michael Mara.
Yeah, we certainly don't need any more friction for these businesses and how they export to our biggest export markets, which is the rest of the UK. And if you're looking at a situation where you've got different barcodes in England than you have to have in Scotland to make this work, it's absolutely crazy. So I think there's a real case to say we should have a more a uniform scheme that works together across the country so we support jobs in this country. And I do think we need to listen to people like Nick making a really passionate argument about this on behalf of that whole industry who are really suffering. If we're going to see the economy recover, we should be giving them support at this point in time, not putting these extra burdens. We're absolutely committed as Labour to making a scheme that works. Absolutely clear on that, and I think we'd be unanimous around this. But the Minister can't answer the most basic questions about this in front of committees. The performances in the chamber, answering questions this have been appalling. And actually it shows
a government that fines go.
Well, the Minister doesn't know where it goes. I mean, it's completely out of control and there's no grip on this, what should be, actually, in some respects, a pretty basic thing to do. It's been done in other countries. We're not even listening to other countries. We're not asking the question.
Let's listen to our audience. The 20p tariff will come from producers to retailers and then to all of us. We'll get it back, is the idea. Man on the front row.
Yeah, I'm a small drinks producer. I'm totally with Nick in terms of some of the criticism, but I completely see where Kelly's coming from. Get on with it and do it correctly. I lived in Germany for 6 years. They've had a scheme there that's been working for 2 decades, if not more. It works really well. There are good models out there.
So this is something we agree on.
It has to be done in terms of the recycling, the environmental messages, the environmental impact on it.
So right now, what's the impact going to be on your business? I mean, are you going to sign up for this? You've only got to wait.
I've already signed up. I've already paid up. I'm a slightly unusual case. With my friend and I here, we are both small drinks producers. I'm tiny, really, really small. So I pay the same amount as Coca-Cola does. That said, however, I am absolutely committed to try and make it work when it comes out, and I'll do the best I can. It's really important that we do it. Let's just get it right.
And Chuck, next to you as well, what's your view?
I run a small brewery just up the road from here. One of our significant challenges is the trade barrier that it creates. So we create thousands of pounds of revenue sending products to the rest of the UK, generally through our web shop. But because of the two styles of barcode, we need a separate web shop because our current one and most producers of web shops can't handle a different cost plus 20 pence and so forth. So the cost of a new web shop holding separate stock, separate barcodes, separate labels makes it unviable for us.
So is it possible you might not supply Scotland?
Yeah, well, that's the difficulty we have at the moment is that we'd be on last year's trading, we'd be running at a loss supplying the rest of the UK. So it's the difficulties of yeah, as the previous person said, we're treated as like big business. So if there was an opportunity to treat small businesses as small businesses, so yeah, if the annual fee was slightly less, or the first 10,000 cans per year was free, then it would sort of subsidise our additional costs, and then it would be workable.
That's why, not these charming chaps here, I'm sure, but when you see just driving up the A9 today, the number of bottles and cans lying at the side of the road, isn't it right that producers should take some responsibility financially for all this and for clearing it up?
I think we're all in agreement that we need to recycle more.
Yep.
Got examples of Sweden. I used to live in the Netherlands. They've been recycling properly for 20 years. We're all in agreement we need to not increase the costs to business. It's an extremely complex system. We need to simplify it. We need to consult and listen, and we need to communicate better. And we're all in agreement on this, Stephen. A good one to end on.
Yeah. Gentleman in the back row over there.
There seems to be in this country this we want to reinvent the wheel. If we look slightly backwards, we had track and trace. Oh, we're not going to do it that way. Let's make our own system. And it sounds like rather than copy what already works in other countries, we're determined to do something that's different. So is it a pride thing? What is it stopping us taking on board Sweden, Netherlands, Germany and doing the same thing?
Richard Thompson.
Well, I think there's agreement that we need to do more to recycle. I mean, from a personal point of view, I think that there should be a greater onus on manufacturers for dealing with the end cost to the taxpayer of dealing with the problem that their packaging has created. But equally, it has to be a system that's understood and can work. And I'm not, and I can certainly hear the concerns of some businesses in terms of the practicalities of how this scheme would work. So I think it's important that whatever you try to bring in, however good the intentions are, it has to be practical.
So that man's point there, why didn't we just look at the countries that do it well and adopt their schemes here? Why have we tried to reinvent the wheel on this and ended up with where we are? With Fergus Ewing, a former Cabinet Secretary, saying it's going to be a disaster.
Well, other countries deal with their waste streams in different ways at different stages, so I can't really answer the question about why we can't just lift a system off the peg from perhaps Sweden or Germany, because, you know, Scandinavia, there's a lot more incineration of waste in terms of their system. But fundamentally, it has to work, it has to be understood, and it has to be equitable. And those are the questions that ministers will have to be able to satisfy people with before it comes in.
So should it be paused, perhaps especially in the light of today's announcement? Should we put a pause on this, take on board the concerns of industry and change this scheme to get it right as far as they are concerned?
Well, like I say, before it's introduced, you have to be able to have shown that you've done everything to address those concerns reasonably.
OK, into our audience, lady in the white here.
Nick's right. I mean, being in the hospitality industry, this has sort of come under the radar, and I, like Nick, found out about it via social media and have looked into it quite substantially since then. And one of the issues is going to be that there's a difference between England and ourselves. So, a little like the Cali wine stores, we're going to have places over the border where you know, big companies are going to fill up vans and bring the less 20 pence drinks across the border into Scotland, where they've got the wrong barcode on them, for one. And it's not just the 20 pence per unit. It's also all the administration that goes into that as well that isn't factored into it, that will have to be passed on to the customer. And there's this thought in that. Remember the days when we used to put the bottles back? It's not like that. That was a voluntary scheme where bars cleaned the bottles out and refilled them. These bottles are going to get smashed up and made into other bottles. It's not that romantic scheme that we used to have years ago. It's not that.
This is due to be an industry-led scheme. That's the idea behind it. Isn't it right that industry should take responsibility for clearing up the problem that is caused by all of this?
100% agree with that, and we want to do it, but you're not going to do it by railroading through a system that's unfair. So in Scotland, we've worked really hard over the last 15 years. Small craft beer producers, small craft gin producers, small craft distilleries. We are the richer for it, the better for it. And I fear that if this does go through, and I don't think it will, if this does go through, we'll lose so much rich texture to our society. And, you know, you just look at, from outside, looking into Scotland, the country we want to be, the great food and drink industry, pulling in, tourism into here. we're in danger of turning it into some anodyne. Only the big boys can actually survive in this landscape.
Okay, it is late desperate to come back in here.
You're talking about our industry taking responsibility. Our industry recycles every single bottle that we sell.
The producers.
No, as the hospital.
But the producers are actually the ones that put this into the marketplace.
Well,
but we have to recycle.
We have to recycle. Our bins won't be picked up unless the glass is in the glass bin. If your bin is contaminated with glass in the non-glass bin, it'll not be picked up. So as an industry, we're very, very responsible when it comes to recycling.
Gentleman here.
Yeah, just in terms of the us looking after the waste product. I've been running a personal voluntary scheme where I take bottles back and reuse them. That now becomes unviable because of this system, which is less effective because I'm going to get a ton of broken glass, not a ton of usable bottles. Totally behind it. It just needs to be done right.
Michael Mara, the big concern is the impact this will have as well on recycling schemes that are already underway with local authorities, to some of them saying they're going to pull back on all of this now.
I've done it already.
Yeah, they're doing it already, absolutely, across the country. And local authorities, as stretched as their budgets are, an absolutely appalling budget settlement that's leading cuts across the board. I mean, this will be seen in some respects as just something else that can go. You know, there's an opportunity there. So we do need to take all of, I think we've heard from the audience tonight and the panel, really seriously. I do think, actually, today, and you mentioned it yourself, Stephen, this is one of the things that this change in leadership in the government, there's an opportunity now at this moment to say, frankly, there's a lot of things, but this is one that could just be stopped here and now. We need to look at it seriously, take on board these concerns and do something about it.
Tess White, finally.
I completely agree. We need to press the pause button. Lorna Slater, if you're listening to us tonight, please listen properly, hear what we're saying, hear what the industry is saying, and press pause.
We're out of time here this evening in Pitlochry. Thank you very much indeed to everyone here. Next week, we're going to be in Kelso. You can apply to be in the audience, bbc.co.uk/debate night. Glenroth is the next week. If you missed any of tonight's show, we're repeated on BBC One Scotland a little bit later, or you can catch up any time on the BBC iPlayer as well. Thank you to my panel here tonight and to our lovely audience in this beautiful venue here in Pitlochry, and of course to you at home for watching. We will see you next week in Kelso. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. From all of us in Debate Night, good night.